But Mr. Thale, isn't it better to have the United States do the training, focus on the human rights, and try and get these police forces up to a level that would be satisfactory instead of what used to happen in the past? Isn't it better for the U.S. to participate that way?
Well, yeah, I probably have a slightly different take on this than Ted does. I mean, it's clear that the strategic situation in the region has changed. I think if you ask what are the major concerns of people in the region and what ought the United States be doing in response to that, the first concern is poverty and inequality, and the second one is crime and insecurity. And the danger in Latin America is that the temptation is to respond to crime and insecurity with militarized policing, with mano dura policies, with lock them up and throw away the key kind of approaches. If the United States can be helpful to Latin American governments and Latin American civil societies in training and developing modern professional civilian police forces in the context of larger responses to crime and insecurity, that's probably a good thing. I think Ted is right to argue that there's real problems in U.S. history with this, and that's why U.S. police training needs to be transparent. There needs to be oversight from Latin American civil society groups of it, and there need to be guarantees that it's done by civilians and not either by or for the military. I think those ought to be the emphasis. Within that emphasis, if the United States can offer constructive training, I think that's probably a good thing to do.
But that is what the ILEA is arguing in El Salvador, is that they are transparent, that they are doing training for police and not for the military, and that it is not a school of the Americas. However, there are some who believe that that is still a way for the United States to maintain control and continue the same, business as usual.
And they haven't released the curriculum and those sorts of things for the schools, so these create problems.
I don't think it meets the standards for transparency or accountability and oversight or the guarantees of civilian control. I think that the challenge ought to be to try and push it to live up to those standards rather than to shut it down. And in defense terms, the reality is I'm afraid the U.S. military is going to continue to see drug interdiction and drug eradication in the region as the central strategic problem, and one that U.S. military resources are directed to.
Because it seems, Mr. Lewis, that most of the problems coming from Latin America have to do with crime and drugs versus terrorism as it is in the Middle East, as far as the threat from Latin America.
Yeah, I think that's absolutely right. I don't know what the Southern Command is thinking in terms of oil resources and that sort of thing. You often hear, the idea coming from places like Venezuela that the United States covets the oil supplies. I don't think that's a real issue, and I think that the United States is unlikely to engage in any kind of serious, military actions in the region other than the ones that you're talking about. I do think that it's important that, as Jeff said, that we really monitor the kinds of signals that are coming from militaries in the region as well as from the United States to the region, because it's important to note that the United States' tendency to try and support military coups has not ended. Even during the current administration, there was a full green light given to the 2002 coup against Hugo Chavez in Venezuela, which has had very negative repercussions. It was the first time that all the countries in Latin America lined up very clearly and very quickly to oppose a coup, and that was pivotal in pushing it back. But the one country that was out of step there and was giving the green light to it was the United States.
Mr. Thale, do you see a difference in the new administration coming into the United States, the McCain administration versus Obama?
Well, I think there's pretty clear differences in tone between a McCain administration and an Obama administration in terms of, it's pretty clear a McCain administration toward Latin America would continue the current policy. Plan Colombia, an emphasis on free trade, maintenance of our current kind of pattern of relationships, isolation of Cuba. I think an Obama administration has indicated that on Cuba and Venezuela, both, it would probably take a somewhat less confrontational approach and pursue dialogue more than confrontation. I think Obama has talked about re-examining our trade policy and trade agreements. How far those differences will really go, I think, is not yet clear, but I think he's talked about some differences. If I could just jump back to one point Ted made, You know, I think it's right that you were asking about, I think it's right that the real threats in the region, the security issues for the United States, have to do with immigration, have to do with drug trafficking, have to do with health and environment issues and things like that. They're social challenges. They're not traditional military challenges. And one of the big questions is, will the United States give the authority and the lead role to respond to these to civilian institutions here and there, or will it, because these are defined as security problems, let the Southern Command of the U.S. Or the U.S. military and their Latin American counterparts take the lead in responding? And I think that's a big challenge and a big threat.
Well, thank you very much, both of you, for being with us today. Ted Lewis from Global Exchange here in San Francisco, and in Washington, D.C., Jeff Thale from the Washington Office on Latin America. I also want to thank you at home, or if you're joining us on the web, for being with us today. Also, thanks go out to American University in Washington, D.C. and the University of Miami in Miami, Florida for their support in the production of this program. Join us next time when we take a closer look at Latin America through the eyes of Latin American media. For more information about Pulso Latino and Latin America, just log on to linktv.org. I'm Mena Cuevas. Thanks for watching. We'll see you next time here on Latin Pulse.